democratic country. Come on, school.
Dinga ban ga mata da yawa yawa ku sha'awa kuka fito wannan zanga-zanga. Just say something. Why are you taking part in this protest?
Muna neman haƙƙin wani.
Okay.
Da ƙasa ta rike mana.
Na, kamar da me da
me? Gani talaka suna cikin wahala suna cikin tashin hankalin yunwa.
Na.
Shi kaɗai wanda ya isa ce shugabannin mutum duba. Duk lokacin da za su hawo mulki. Suna yi ma ƙasa alƙawarin cewa za su yi aiki da kai.
Na.
To me dalilin da sa suka samu ba sa duba halin da talakawa suke ciki.
Gaskiya ne.
Yanzu fa abincin da talaka zai ci ya fita nemo da suka awara. Wanda awaki ke ci.
Gaskiya.
Sai ke safarawa ya ci. Da haka ɗin ma sai ga mai kuɗi.
To yanzu zuwa ina da
minimum wage is too much for an average Nigeria. The 300 minimum wage is too much for an average Nigeria. So to start with, some councillors that does not have even SSC, they are collecting 500,000. It's true. So let the salary of those councillors, because they don't have the minimum requirement, let it return in that 70,000 they want to give us. Let us see that in the court of governance. The same goes for those in the House of Assembly. The same goes for those in the House of Rep and the National Assembly. Reduce their cost of governance. If they are saying the minimum wage of 300,000 is too much for them, then they must also be receiving that minimum wage. At least they don't have fuel. Number one. Patronize made in Nigeria goods. Patronize what? Patronize what? Patronize what? How many lawmakers are using motor cars that have been made by innocent motor vehicles? How many lawmakers? Allah da a ce akwai dire ba Allah ce mai ga mutum Allah
ba za a samu direbobin da suka iya ba. Idan ba yau sai dai in mutu ba Allah ya tsina na fito ne na rantsa da Allah na fito ne mu kai na aiki Allah yau sai dai in mutu ba zan ma wannan gurin ba na nemo kai na Allah salamu alaikum yan uwa ku fito mu babu ne ba ku da yanci da yanci gwamna ya gwamna da muke amana da reality an ce mana gwamna da fito amma da ana rubuta Hungry unite youth. Hungry unite Nigeria. Hungry Wankoore. No food, no security.
Spoken about August 1st protest is finally here, and we've seen footages of Nigerians going on the streets to protest, holding placards with inscriptions. We've seen lots of so many things have been playing out. Well, you're welcome to the special coverage of the hashtag End Bad Governance Hunger Protest in Nigeria today, and my name is Lilian Ogazi. With me I have Aisha Salihu. All right, so and I also have Mr. Wilson Inaligu. You're welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. The former
FCT Police Commissioner.
Yes. Thank you so much, former Assistant Secretary General of Police. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, we've seen what is happening. Personally, I experienced it this morning on my way. I saw that the protest, which is what the government have been scared of, it's been hijacked. I saw a couple of, I wouldn't call them hoodlums, but I don't think they knew what they were protesting for. They took placards. They weren't even with placards. They were with leaves, and we saw the police officers there. Actually, they tried to disperse them, but as at the moment that when I'm speaking to you now, I'm pretty sure they have blocked down the Kubwa Express because cars were not allowed to pass. they were directing cars towards the service lane. But in your experience, how do you see this playing out?
Yeah, I think it's first of all, once you have this number of people come out, you are going to have challenges. But then it's for the security agencies to look at those flashpoints and craft their deployments in such a way that they're able to deal with those situations. And you can achieve that through coordination with relevant securities like the civil defense and others. You've got to look at the critical infrastructure and then places that people are likely to take laws into their hands. For example, like zones, for example, you have some people with leaves, and I was really surprised because they didn't have any coverage of physical presence. It therefore shows that there is like in coordinating with, for example, the civil defense and the DSS, for example, they should be able to tell you, look, your roving patrols, we're having situation at this point, and then they should have rapid response to be able to deal with this particular situation. But I think the security forces, the police will continue to engage the public, and the public need to be reminded that peaceful protest does not mean you want people to loot and all of that. All these other people bringing in problem. And I just stated here in your studio that it starts as peaceful protest. And when it starts as peaceful protest and you are not able to take command, you are going to have some elements, take advantage. And so what is important now is for the security agencies, all the DPs in the various places, all the security locations, they've got to activate the operation order they have drawn. And in doing that, those who are seen that are causing problem, arrests be made, and then let it be announced that some people here who are not part of the protest are trying to take laws into their hands. They've been apprehended. So the security forces must show capacity and that they are in charge. That's the way they'll get the confidence of the public. So it is important, first of all, to look at where are the likely places, because they have been confined
To the stadium.
But you should know that in your plan, there are some people that are going to violate it. So you have to anticipate. And I think in addition to those static deployments going with the peaceful protesters, there are patrols going around. So I think it's calling on the public and then giving telephone numbers that members of the public who observe such isolated protests can quickly reach the control room.
I believe you have just responded to the situation in the FCT, just like Lillian asked earlier. Now, earlier in the news, we heard reporters across the states. We heard people from Kano, from Katsina, from Maiduguri, and they're telling us that right now the protest, the violence kind of has taken over the protest, and then it's as if the police is overwhelmed. At this particular point, what would you advise the police do? Because we heard the IG saying there's going to be heavy deployment of police forces plus other sister security agencies, but then it seems as if the security operatives are overwhelmed in these northern states where violence has erupted.
I don't want to use the word overwhelmed. Of course, you are going to have this situation, and I think the police is going to respond to them. But I think the leaders of those isolated breakout groups must be engaged. And when they're engaged, they should be told that this is not an avenue for you to line your pocket with looted property. So I think what they need to do, if I am to advise the Commissioner of Police or the Inspector General of Police, through intelligence, the DSS, the Special Intelligence Bureau of the Nigeria Police Force, and the military intelligence, because it's not at that stage that you are going to activate MAP or MACA, the Military Assistance to Civil Authority. It's not at that stage. But what you need to do, the collaboration among the intelligence units, the intelligence of the military, intelligence of the police, and other, to begin to come in with these locations so that those officers who are on patrol will quickly go and dislodge such individuals. And if it becomes necessary to make arrests, they will make arrests. And then they should also let people know that this is supposed to be a peaceful protest. And even those who organize this should also, they should encourage them to go on radio and tell their supporters that, look, if you find somebody in your location that is going overboard, you've got to report to security. So numbers should be circulated.
Okay, so you know what? To buttress more on our conversation, we're going to take a situation report and look at what is happening around the country. Do not touch that dial. We'll be right back.
How many lawmakers are using motor cars that have been made by local motor vehicles? How many lawmakers?
Or welcome back from that. Well, there we've seen a live footage of what is actually happening in Kano. Now, with us in the studio, we still have our guest with us, and let's quickly get back to our conversation before we get to meet our guest via Zoom. We also actually do have a guest via Zoom as well. Now, let's get your reaction on what you've seen so far. Is this expected? Were you expecting this when you heard of the planned protest?
In every protest that you are going to bring out people, even if they are just 100 in number, these are unintended consequences. And in developing your operations plan, you've got to factor such factors. That is why this is how it starts. As you go peacefully with the protesters, you should have that critical mass that will respond when the situation suddenly changes, as witnessed in this video. So in every plan you do, and there are stages, and that is even the training that you receive. That is why we before you have the unit which you deploy, the first you deploy, they are not with arms. The one that is called, they don't carry weapon. They are not even carrying tear gas. But when you begin to observe that you already have situation developing, you bring the tear gas people to the front and they are able to deal with the situation, and you make arrests. I hope you understand.
Yes.
So, but when it begins to go to the third stage of arson and harming of people or killing of innocent people, then you deploy the rifle section. So the batting section, the rifle section. And then when that gets overwhelmed, that's you begin to think of MACA, military assistance to civil authority, or military assistance to civil power. They call it MACP, which are the training that the police and the military receive. And so when you are in training in JAWS, in the staff college, it gets to that stage of counterinsurgency, you go to JAGI and you do the simulation. So when the situation develops the way it has developed, when it gets to arson, taking laws into their hands, then you withdraw those that are not carrying weapons, that are using hand tools, and then those people who are doing this, you can use your tear gas so that you make arrests. But that's when the situation has really developed.
Okay.
But what it does happen is you've got to begin to anticipate from the intelligence that you receive. But that does not stop you from continuous engagement, because you've got to identify those you see in the crowd to be the leaders. You've got to engage them, talk to your people. This is not what we agreed. We agreed on peaceful protest, but what we see is different. And so, but even when you are doing this continuous engagement, and then you've got to have a communication strategy. What information do you pass to the public? Because there will be apprehension. Like when I was coming to the studio, they said, I don't hear what is happening. I said, no, I understand. So the point I'm making is, even using this medium that we are here, we've got to continue to appeal to the public that what you intended has been hijacked. And though you take responsibility, and those that are not part of it, you've got to identify them so that they can be arrested. But what you cannot neglect is engaging even with the routers as it would appear on the screen.
All right, so out of experience, I'm sure you've experienced a protest like this in Nigeria. And how would you be able to, now at this point, I know in some places in Abuja, you've actually seen it being hijacked. We've seen what is happening in Kano. I think we saw a report in Borno saying that curfew has been imposed. What should be the best move by the security agencies? Do you think, from what you're observing, do you think they're well prepared for this August 1st planned protest, being that it's been in the news for a very long time?
Well, I think in the circumstance, peaceful protests and all that, they are prepared. That they use tear gas doesn't mean they are not prepared. Because if they were talking unawares, they would have been going to the armory to get tear gas. But because they respond promptly to dislodge these people who want to cause mayhem, shows that level of preparedness. You understand? But as much as possible, they would not want to use tear gas or firearm, as much as possible. So when they are pushed to this level, because you've got to do that to save life. And that is why, if in my introductory remarks, I talk about coordinating with other security agencies to look at those critical infrastructure, like the government house is sensitive. You've got to deploy proactively way before the government house, not to come and block the gate. You've got to create that cordon. So once you create that cordon, and they already breaching that cordon, you've got your officers line up the whole place. They create a human shield, a human cordon. They link their elbow, and they are pushing the crowd. And you discover that the crowd is clearly overwhelming them. Then they give way, and the smoke section will come to restore sanity.
So you have talked about the methods that the police should deploy just in case there is further or more anarchy in states across the country. But then again, it would be nice for us to also address the fact that there are also some of these people, some of these protesters who do not intend to cause any violence or mayhem. How then will the police ensure that this crop of people are equally safe? Because if you're saying a lot of these measures for people who are enacting violence and all that, what about people who are honest protesters and do not intend to loot or carry out any form of violence?
Yeah, see, the honest protesters have a duty. You see, when it started like unknown people.
Right.
The leadership was not identified. Only on the eve before most of them began to come out. You see, why the request that you apply is to enable the security agencies factor that in their plan, because they've got to sit with you and say, look, where do you intend to go? And they say, look, we are going to go from Ojo Elegba to Surulere, for example. And you identify the route. Why do you do that? So you now know that you can provide adequate security for that route. But if you don't identify and you are restricted to an area and you violate it, you make it difficult for security agencies. Don't forget, you've got to draw that human resource from various places to make. The MOPOL may not be sufficient. The quick intervention unit may not be sufficient. So you draw. So in your planning, you've got to see people that, you've got to see their faces and say, look, and those people will always guide you. If you notice, when labor goes on protest, you don't witness this type of situation. Why? Because labor will come up with their plan. We are going from Unity Fountain through Eagle Square to the National Assembly Gate. And then you are able to plan. And once you are marching, even if from Wuse Market you are marching to Eagle Square, and the labor people, the young other guys among them say, look, OC, this man is not part of us. Take him out. That helps. But where you have planned your protest, and you don't factor security, even if you have 1 million security officers, what can they do?
Okay, so,
you make the job difficult for them.
Okay. So in a nutshell, you're technically saying that the fact that there may not have been any proper structure that has been put in place by the faceless or anonymous organizers of this protest, it has somehow affected the way they work with security outfits in order to restore law and order. Right.
Well, I hope that's what I said, but let me make myself clear. What I'm saying is, it is helpful when you are planning a protest, because you are not doing anything. You want to exercise your right under the Constitution. But you know, what if others had planned a similar protest? Let me give you an example. When I was Commissioner of Police in the FCT, there are days we police 4 protests. Some are counter, but we arrange the timing. This one is 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock. You've got to be disciplined too. And the other one take it from 3 to 4. If you don't have such a focus, you are going to be all over the place.
Right.
And so it makes it difficult for you. Like now, they're having this protest. There are people, for example, at the stadium, there are people in perhaps in Yanya, in Lokogoma, who are having their own. But if you plan it, because it is not just to express yourself, it's just to ventilate. It's not to cause mayhem.
Right.
Because of that, that is why you apply. Now, when you are granting that approval, you look at it, do we have anything conflicting? Because you cannot get all the personnel. Even if you use all the police in the FCT, it's not going to be possible. That's why you've got to take the security forces into confidence, especially the police, because the police, by the structure, by the law, it's not possible for them to bend so much to the left or bend so much to the right, because they know a day of reckoning will come. A police officer is always thinking that what I did this year, in the next 5 years, I could be called upon to explain what I did. So he's very mindful of what he does.
All right, now let's get back to the protest. I love the fact you came out to say that during planning, they have to factor in the security agencies. And you also pointed out to the fact that when you were in the FCT, you had moments where you had to man over 5 protests because they were planned. But now these people are protesting and they have reasons why they're out on the streets. Nigerians have come out to say it's end bad governance, not just end bad governance. They're protesting against removal of fuel subsidy. They're protesting against high cost of living, economic policies. People can no longer afford the basic things they used to. They now seem like luxury to them. At this point in time, let's look at from the angle of the people. Do you think people with this mindset would want to factor in the security agents, whom they seem in their head are working with the government because they're coming out to protest for something they feel, or they feel they need the better governance and better economic policies for. Do you think factoring the government, with all of this now, do you think that would have been possible?
Factoring the government, factoring the police doesn't mean that, because they that are coming on demonstration protest, they also need security.
Right.
Because there could be people can infiltrate. Don't forget, the election of 2023, we are in 2024. You can never discountenance the fact that there are elements that are disgruntled, elements that are not happy. So even part of the government feel that they gave a lot to this government and they were not supported. So you are going to have a lot of people with all manner of needs, agitation. So that's going to happen. But if we, because end bad government, in my opinion, is let's build an all-inclusive society. Let's have a government that can listen. Let's have a government that will address those things that are dear to us. And if it means the government alone cannot build the country, the people must join hand. And in joining this hand, it is not when you begin to cause destruction. And that is why, because I imagine that the organizers are properly enlightened, I mean, very senior lawyers and others in the society. Therefore, I expect that they are saying that, look, we want to exercise the office of the private citizen. And so you have civil society organizations and all other groups coming together. And if you've got to take the security forces in confidence. Otherwise, you can have people sponsoring other people just to blackmail the government. Oh, we know the government cannot even guarantee peaceful protest. So those people are certainly going to hijack. And because they can hijack, you've got to do your bit as a public-spirited individual to take the security forces along. Because in every of all this, there are lessons learned. The lessons learned from the answers, even the lessons learned in the recent Kenyan protest that started as a tax protest and said, Ruto must go. So there are people that have these things boiling, and how do they express them? How do they ventilate them?
But in the midst of that, there are also people who are in there coming out for the genuine reason.
Exactly.
For the fact that they cannot afford a certain standard of living that they used to. For the anger and the pain of, oh, we can't eat anymore like we used to. You know, the country is becoming too difficult to even feed my children. We have those people in the mix at this point. So do you think they're going in the right direction?
And because those things are so germane in their request, what it does mean, you will not let anybody try to truncate it. And how do you make it people not to truncate it? It's by collaboration with security. You know, in governance and even in security, it is about you and the public. And that is why I've been emphasizing that the police will continue to engage different groups, civil society, because if we don't do that, we will miss the mark. Because if other people who are disgruntled, people who don't love Nigeria, who want Nigeria to be perpetual violence, state of chaos, they can take advantage, because we've got to unite as a country. And in that unity, we've got to take into account. Let us now, assuming the situation gets out of hand, and there is an inquiry, a judicial commission of inquiry, and the police will say, look, we were not fully briefed. We just acted on a generic situation, and we try to understand this the way it be. But when it did develop, it went outside what we thought. The court restricted them to the National Stadium or to the Freedom Park or wherever, and then they got out of it. And so, and once it starts like this, you've got to act decisively in some situation. Otherwise, you are going to have innocent lives lost. And so you don't begin to apportion blame as to why did they use tear gas? And I'm happy they're not going to, I'm sure they're not going to use lethal weapon.
Okay, but before we take our Zoom guests, I know where, but you just said, we just got a report coming in from Suleja that shots were fired and a life was lost in the peaceful protest. But we'll get to that.
Now, let's go on now to take our guest virtually. We have Comrade Egbiola Martins, who is a public affairs analyst. He's also the National Publicity Secretary, Young Progressive Party. Thank you so much for joining us on the program, Comrade.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
I'd like to quickly hear your thoughts on this. You have seen what's happening regarding the protests across the country. Now, in some states, especially in the north, would say we have violence erupting in those states. I'd like for you to, how do we now make sense of this? The fact that, the protesters said they were planning to protest against hunger in the country, but then it seems as if violence has taken over. How does this now impact the protests?
Honestly, I think ab initio, the government already succeeded in escalating the protest itself and made it look dangerous. And rather than the government seeing how to address some of the problems that the protesters have highlighted, what the government succeeded in doing was seeing all the negatives in the self-protests. How did we get to this point? Nigerians, have persevered, they've been patient with the government over time, trying to make sense of the several anti-masses policies that have driven Nigerians into extreme poverty. Now, you wouldn't blame Nigerians if the only way they could react was through protest. This could have been avoided if the government were to be more sensitive in terms of listening to Nigerians and also showing by examples some of the sacrifices they also have made to ensure that we begin to rebuild the Nigeria of our dream. But contrary to what we see and what we hear, the government will tell you on one hand that you should, adjust and then bear with it. Over time, things will get better. Yet, you continue to see the same set of people who live lavishly on our commonwealth and then begin to spend money in a manner that you think that we are not going through a serious economic crisis. I think that has been the situation. We can't overemphasize it, that protesting is actually within the rights of Nigerians who are aggrieved. And also it's incumbent on the government to also provide protection for those who are actually protesting peacefully. Now, if what the government did was to see all the wrong in a protest and also preempting violence, I think we're not surprised that that is what we're actually getting at this point in time.
All right, thank you, Comrade. But let me throw my next question to you, sir, here in the studio with us now. He said something. He said it's more like the government preempted the violence. Now, we've always complained the government is not proactive. How come on this particular one they decided to be proactive on it and preempt it and put out there were so many warnings? Like what he said it's almost like they put this in the minds of the people because they kept on, no, we don't want it to go violent. People were coming out, different voices were coming out to speak. They were trying to implement policies at the end time. What's your take on all that last minute move?
Yeah, I think there is a saying that once beaten, twice shy. If you take the lessons of the NSAS, it will be apprehensive of having people come together to have such a protest. Even if you don't have anything, you've got to say, look, it's going to be it might be hijacked. It could turn out violent. That's by the benefits of hindsight. And then let me tell you, it brings us back to the point I was making. Now, government was saying all this. How do you now prove that you are responsible and you do what is right? How do you do that? Is by collaborating with same government through the police and other agencies. Look, we are not violence. This is what we intend to do. This is not rocket science. It's simple. I have, in my 30-something years of experience, I have been managing protests from one state to another. And I have managed several protests in the FCT, in Jos and other places I've worked. I've had protests. Protest is guaranteed in the Constitution, but it is not what you can do alone. You've got to open that window of trust. And I'm not, we manage the Occupy Nigeria. We started from the Nobel laureate, Wole Soyinka, and we led all of them, we followed them like that to the National Assembly until they were addressed. While they were doing their own, others people were trying to counter. We got on our group to manage those ones. Now, if when Wole Soyinka and his group started, they wouldn't tell us, we find them at Unity Fountain, we'll find another group at Stadium. It's because others can take advantage of that loophole. So I think going forward, because these organizers are enlightened, as I believe, as I think they are, is to take the security forces into confidence, because it takes two to tango. One hand cannot wash itself effectively. It is two. So they've got to trust. Otherwise, they expose themselves to unnecessary danger, unless there are ulterior motives. But if it is not political, if it is a protest that is organized by civil society groups, I will work with the civil society. The civil society move the society forward, because they come with things they think they are not right. Look at the laws, the electoral law that have been amended from time to time was engineered by the civil society from their observations of monitoring elections, lessons learned, and they brought them forward, and they go into the National Assembly, and then the electoral law continues to be improved. And in the same way, you cannot come and you try to build a society, and then you are hiding something. It should be open, it should be transparent.
Okay, let me come in here very quickly. You know, this protest has been scheduled for 10 days, and this is just day one, and we're seeing a couple of mayhem and violence around there. I'd like to know, what do you suggest is the next strategy going into the second day?
Going into the second day, already the organizers, I think they need to do better. They need to do a better job. If I were part of the organizers, I'll take 5 days off and go into proper planning, because the atmosphere, as I can see, is not conducive for further protests.
Okay, let us take it away from the organizers. Now, talking about security agents.
No, security agencies, of course, whatever you do, you go back. There are lessons learned. Don't forget, this is the first day. So there are bound to be areas that you need to adjust. I hope you understand. But I think all these places, one of the things if I am to recommend, more coordination. I don't know. I'm not in the plan, but assuming I'm there, I'll say more coordination. I'll identify critical, because by now they have lists of the critical national infrastructure, and then to look at those areas and make static deployments, and then quick response. Quick response to be able to deal with issues like this that may come up. And I think if we do that, we will be able to nib in the bud, and then intelligence, sharing intelligence, and then communication to the public. That is, the spokespersons of the security forces should now come together and develop a strategy if they don't have one, and to see how they can communicate timely, so that things that is happening in Borno, the ID or the Force PRO or the DIG operations should be able to give situation, the real situation, so that people don't get so much alarm. You know, I think more communication by the Inspector General of Police, but I think the DIG operations or the AIG operation or the Commissioner of Police Federal Operations and the Force PRO to give the situation as it happens, so that, oh, they're already killing people in Syria, oh, they are doing this, they should be able to come out and say, no, this is the situation that is on ground.
Okay, let's quickly hear from our Zoom guests. We still have our Zoom guests. Comrade, can you hear us? All right, now, this is just day one. Just like my co-anchor Aisha asked, this is just day one, and we're seeing the violence that has erupted in different parts of the country. Moving forward, day two, what do you suggest? Do you think a better plan should be made? What's your thoughts on day one? And, this is a 10 days protest. So what's your thoughts on what day two would look like and what might play out?
Well, it's unfortunate that it has gotten to a situation where we never prayed to get to, and that is losing lives in the course of protests. It was meant to be a peaceful protest. Unfortunately, we are not sure of what led to some of the protests being violent, because in the past, the government also have been fingered in most of this violence, which has always been a tactic they deploy to have a justification for why the protest should not be held in the first place. I'm forgetting that most of those who have been part of government over time have been products of protest. However, I don't know, it's just a thing with we as human beings. We're very selfish, we're self-centered. And, as soon as we are in position of authority to be able to make change, we tend to really end up being self-seeking, forgetting that power itself is transient.
Okay.
I think there's a need for all critical stakeholders to have an inward look into what must have led to this violence, more especially the security agencies. I think they should up their game in terms of providing adequate security for genuine protesters. And they have the capacity in terms of intelligence to be able to dictate to those who are out to foment trouble and ensure that those people who are out to foment trouble are arrested and they are adequately dealt with in line with the law. That is why they are being paid, to gather intelligence, to make arrests, and also punish wrongdoers, and not to lose what should be the rights of people. We cannot say people should be deprived of their rights on account of some few bad eggs. Those bad eggs should be fished out and appropriately dealt with. And that is my own honest opinion going forward.
Earlier,
I also want to...
Comrade, earlier you stated that it's more like the government preempted violence, hence the violence we're seeing during the protests across the nation. Now, I'd like to hear from you. What do you think are likely to be the political undertone of this protest? And can we really say that these protests are for altruistic reasons?
Honestly, except for those who are actually not living in Nigeria, including the guests in your studio, you will not say things have been the same in the last 1 year. That Nigerians, we should even commend Nigerians. The elasticity is infinite. They are some kind of the patient set of citizens anywhere in the world, and the best set of citizens to lead anywhere in the world. They are not asking for too much. A land that is rich and blessed with abundant resources, yet we are living in abject poverty on account of the lack of quality leadership, on account of greed. We've been complaining about how things have been messed up in our economy, yet you see the legislature who embark on a spending spree of 57 billion naira on exotic cards. Ironically, they didn't even patronize made in Nigerian cards to be able to inflate our economy. They went and took jobs outside of this country. We're talking about, leaders who rather than think about the the sufferings of Nigerians, are planning to buy private jet, or even after they bought a brand new private jet for the president. Is that the kind of nation where you think Nigerians continue to keep quiet and observe? No. There are issues that they've been patient all this while. You continue to take them for granted. They have the right to ventilate. Things is as if we've got leaders who are not listening.
All right, Comrade, talking about, you just said we have the right to ventilate now. So do you think this protest will yield any result? Because we've seen protests back in Nigeria. It only ends up in either it being hijacked or a dialogue being made and most likely not implemented. At this point in time, is this protest the right way?
See, it's always good to have to be able to have to retrospect in terms of looking at what may have happened in the past in order to be able to predict what will happen in the future. But sometimes experiences, especially if it's a bad one, may not be able to give you confident and accurate prediction of what the future might hold. Now, that said, I think the outcome of this protest, even if it does not achieve anything, at least one thing will be sacrosanct, that a message will be sent that is loud and clear to those in authority that Nigeria is on a time bomb. And if they continue to live recklessly the way they are and govern with impunity, that is only time that the people will react. And they have the capacity to be able to be united by their common sufferings and problems to be able to take out any government whichever way they like. So they shouldn't push Nigeria to that point. I believe a message will be sent loud and clear. If there are some psychopaths around the president that is actually telling you that don't worry, forget them, they're making noise. I think it should be a message that should be loud and clear that things are not well. And it's time for us, for them to be able to take radical steps in terms of a radical approach to governance, and not this kind of what we see that is going, these shenanigans that is going on right now, where our leaders are living like very insensitive set of people who do not even feel the pains of Nigerians.
Okay, comrade. We're currently getting a report that there are some pro-Tinubu supporters staging counter-protests in Abuja at the moment. What can you make of this?
It's normal. It's also within their right to protest. Maybe, probably they enjoy what is going on in the country. Or probably there are also those in the school of thought that, look, let's give Mr. President some time. He's just been there for it. But they also forgot that the current president was among those who brought the President Muhammadu Buhari administration that governed recklessly in the last 8 years. So if he thought by being selfish that it was the easiest part of him getting to the presidency, to be able to also take the responsibility for whatever misgovernance that happened under Muhammadu Buhari in the last 8 years. And as such, again, they should also not deprive those who are feeling offended, who feel things are not going in the right direction, who feel there's a need for a radical approach to governance. And they've seen all what has been done so far as signs of bad governance. And I also share in their sentiment. Let's be sincere. The president was inaugurated at the Eagle Square. You've not even taken time to get to office day one to scrutinize things that the handover document and see things from the position of a president. You announce that subsidy is gone. I mean, who does that?
All right.
I mean, this is not it's not elementary. You don't just sit down. You should be able to have an economic team that will do a critical analysis of the pros and cons of removing subsidy, looking at the timing of removing subsidy. In any case, if you remove subsidy, what about those who have benefited from the subsidy fraud? How many of them have been arrested and prosecuted? Look, they are all going and gallivanting and living free. What does that tell Nigerians? It means you only want to plunge them into unnecessary suffering without anything to cushion the effects of the suffering that has come out of this subsidy removal and electricity tariff increment, coupled with the floating of Naira that has made hardship unprecedented in the history of Nigeria.
All right, comrade, thank you so much for that. Now let's get back to our guest in the studio. I believe we've heard everything he said. What's your thoughts? He has spoken about the splitting of the Naira subsidy removal, reasons why Nigerians are angry and should be angry on the streets. But there shouldn't be another way of conveying this, because it seems like for every time Nigerians want to come out and express their anger on something, you find that it goes the wrong way because it's not being planned properly, or it's not being channeled properly, or it's been hijacked, which is what we're seeing now. Things are getting out of hand. What other ways do you think Nigerians can channel this message to the government to understand what they are going through?
I always try to restrict to law enforcement and all that. But if I may comment, I think it's important that the government and the population find a common ground of discussing some of these issues. He raised a lot of critical issues, which I'm not going to comment so much about, but I think it's important to address some of the concerns that have been expressed dealing with them. And it's possible for government, for part of the lessons learned from this one-day peaceful protest, that they are going to do a kind of self-retrospection and to say that, look, now I'm hearing what the people are saying, and I've been hearing. Sometimes when you are too close to government, it's not also very easy for you to say those things because it might be misunderstood to be a move of the opposition in government. So this has been publicly expressed. I just hope that the handlers of the president will allow him the benefit of all this. But I think protest in Nigeria is very difficult. So let us also be very mindful. Let us take the security forces into confidence. There are a lot of professionals. Over 99% or so of the officers are professionals. So when you tell them this is the route you follow, they are likely to give you that necessary protection. Don't judge them because they are wearing uniform. Judge them based on their profession. I am telling you that the police is unlike other security forces. The police, as much as possible, the policeman thinks, look, if you ask me to arrest that man, what offense did he commit? If I arrest that man and detain, and in 5 years you are no longer in government, and they ask me to account for my action, how do I account? So if people understand the mindset of the police, they will always take them into confidence because he is always mindful. He looks at the law most of the time. And that is why you have commissioners of police being changed from one state, because people don't understand the mentality. Because it's the police that you swear an oath to protect the law, irrespective. If your father commits offense, you arrest your mother, your brother. So if people understand, they will not push the
police. Like as rightly said, the police is your friend. So yes, we should, it still boils down to the protest. Take them along and trust that they have your best interest at heart. Well, as the day unfolds, do not go anywhere. We'll be right back to stay.
They actually knew the answer.
From that quick timeout. Well, it's still the special edition for the hunger nationwide protest. Now, is there really no turning back on this protest? Because we're seeing how it's all playing out. Well, we still have Sergio has joined us here in the studio, and we still have our guest here in the studio. Thank you so much for staying with us, sir.
Thank you so much. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So Kano, Nasarawa, Abuja, and across the different states that we've seen the development, take a different toll. These are some of the issues that we'll be bringing to you, of course, on the program. Like Lillian said, we still have in the studio AIG Wilson Inaligwe, a retired police officer who was once, of course, the commissioner of police here in the FCT. AIG, perhaps I would ask this question because just a couple of days ago, we spoke about the security implications of having a protest, that does not have faces supporting or at least leading them. And you spoke to concerns about the possibilities of this protest taking such dimensions and taking such trajectories. Would one now say your points have indicated?
No, these are constant points. Before you arrived, in our earlier discussion, I stated it, I repeated it severally. And I said, look, everything you do is about coordination. You can't do it alone. You've got to collaborate, you've got to cooperate. And so the situation that we find is the police or the security are operating blindly with the snippets of intelligence that they have. They have to work with that. The organizers are enlightening people. They shouldn't make it so, as if it's something that it's about Nigeria. Nigeria is not for one person. And I was telling them that because somebody is uniform doesn't mean that the person is unreasonable. You see, there are standard operating procedures. When you are developing an operations order, for example, for such protest, what you hear from the people organizing, you factor them in your operations order. If you have them, it helps you in your deployment. Now, what the security forces deploy based on intelligence, I think it was only yesterday some of them came out. They had meeting with the IG and all the rest of it. But what they need to do is come up and say, look, this is what we intend to do. Or we want to march from here. We want to march from Bega Junction through Wuse Market down to Zone 4 up to Eagle Square. You define the road. And the police say, no, Wuse is a market. If you go there, some of your protesters may branch. So why don't we go through Zone 7? I hope you understand. Yes. We go to, after the Oando, we turn right. That is part of the strategy you deploy. But when you're operating and the people make it look, we don't trust you because they are wearing uniform. It's wrong. Because,
okay, so,
but then again, yeah,
sorry, talking about trust, so we don't get, of course, into
Yes.
that bit. Now let's talk about trust.
yes.
Is it? You're mentioning that the fact that people don't trust the government is it new? They don't trust the security. Is it new? Is it new that these people don't trust the
No,
police?
but you see, I'm sorry I have to state something. And the police is about the people and the government. They don't go to the left, they don't go to the right. But others are about regime, whoever is in government. If you understand the police like that, you are able to approach them better. Because if, for example, other forces, the government has, but the police is saying, look, this is what the law says. That's the way you are trained. And that is why the oath you take is to protect, enforce the law without fear or favor. That is the training of the police. And many police officers are very professional. And even if there are many police officers, even if you are president, you say, arrest Ismail, for example. They say, if I arrest him, what offense will I charge him with? Do you understand? So if you do not trust the police with all I have said, then there is a problem. Because if you trust the police, it means some of these miscreants that are infiltrating and disrupting the peaceful protest, you deal with them. Because collaboratively, you remove them. And that's where you march responsibly, you march from one point to the other, they give you...
But AIG, how do we then explain the situations and the sites that we are seeing from Kano, for instance? We've seen young Nigerians approach government buildings, cutting away chairs. What business does these chairs have to do with the fact that there is hunger in the land? And we've seen little to no input from these security agencies, be it the police, civil defense, who are supposed to be protecting or manning these critical assets in the state, to do anything in terms of apprehending those who carted away these items.
When you have such a large crowd, unless you are going to kill up those 100, certain things are going to happen. Look at the January 6th, 2020 violence in the United States, with all the barriers and all of it. They were able to breach it because they have aim. They want to go and open doors, see if they have money. They want to steal certain things. But in a state like Kano, government create a buffer, a place that if people breach it, you know that they are for violence.
So you're saying at this point they missed something there?
No, well, I wasn't there.
Okay.
I didn't study the operations of that to see the way they arrange their deployment. But I think going forward, the government houses and other critical infrastructure should be thinking of having barriers. You know, you have those barriers you see in the stadium when there are matches. You join them and you put the officers behind them. When people begin to push some 200 meters away from the government house, for example, you're able to reorganize yourself to push them back so that they don't get that close. And that is why I talked about, in my last program, I talked about protection of critical national infrastructure assets. And so in deploying with the police, with the civil defense, I think one of their roles is protection of critical national infrastructure. So they have the police usually will prepare the general operations order, and then those other elements will come up with their own, and you see where you juggle them in your ops order. So you now say, look, civil defense, how many people do you have? Oh, we are bringing 5,000 for this operation. Okay, look, we're going to deploy this number to the National Christian Center, the National Mosque, and all this. And then you have radios that are interoperable. Rely on your police communication alone. That means the guy in the civil defense, the guy in the DSS, the guy in the military is able to talk to you on your radio. So where in their location, when they're overwhelmed, you're able to send reinforcement. And so that's how you bring the deployment together. And in that way, it will act as force multiplier. You have enough people. You are not only dealing with the police, you are dealing with, might be the customs, the immigration who are brought forward. And then you have a kind of simulation. If we have this situation, Because police usually have simulation exercise with the military. When you go on, during our time, they call it intermediate command course in JOS of certain rank, superintendent, chief superintendent. You go to Jaji and spend some time and you simulate a kind of insurgency and what the police reaction and when the military come. We don't have such collaboration, I don't think, with the civil defense. So when you are anticipating this kind of thing, it's an opportunity for you to get together and begin to assign roles, apportion roles, and then you deploy them in that way. In that way, you increase your number, and then the friends of the services who will be giving information so that as they are cutting leave, I say, this guy is a criminal in our neighborhood. I'm sure it's not going for demonstration. They are alerted, the SIB, the DSS, they pick them up. So it's a joint operation. The military at this time is not part of it.
It's not supposed to be involved.
No, it's not involved.
So now, do we now describe the situation that we are seeing, for example, in the FCT as an over-militarization of the process? I mean, because at some point I saw clips from, of course, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and I saw, a military tank there that was supposed to be stationed, and at some point I saw how, a crowd of, do I say angry protesters or angry Nigerians, started hurling objects at it. So would you say that the presence of the military at that point, at that material, sort of exacerbated the tensions?
Well, I ordinarily shouldn't exacerbate the situation because they are not talking to anybody. They are just there because the gas brigade has a responsibility for protecting the villa and the FCT. That's the jurisdiction. So you are not going to ask them because the usual, position. But you will see that they will not go near the demonstrators. They will not, or the protesters. They will go there. They are in their protecting critical national infrastructure. You are not going to send them away.
All right, let's quickly touch on Lagos before we let's look at Lagos. We know how Lagos is with protests. We saw our experience with the NSAS and how it played out. In your experience, what should be done with security in Lagos at this point in time and the protesters?
The standard operating procedure is basically the same.
Okay.
Because whether you are in Lagos has a huge population of 20 to 22 million, they say. So when you have such, but it is not the whole of Lagos that when you are deploying. Of course, you know that Ojota.
There are certain hotspots.
Yes. Or Oshodi, or Mushin. So when you are doing your deployment, you rely more on intelligence, and you've got to be mobile, highly mobile. You have, and then when the first deployment you make, they are civil, they are carrying no weapon, they are just using their hand. Please don't do anything, don't cause problems. But in every place you go, there are leaders. In every place. If you go to Ajigunle, follow their papa, there are leaders. You identify those key people. Once you continually engage them, they are going to talk, because these guys will live. They are not just, they all have leaders. So that is why we talk about continuous engagement. And that is why you have the police community relations committee, which is a structure that you have, the police has, to reaching the public. And then the DPUs also have their relationship and all the other officers on the line.
Let me come back to you.
The place is big, but when you break it down in policing, it becomes small.
Okay. All right, then let's quickly take Dr. Aminu Hayatu, Senior Lecturer Political Science at the Bayero University, Kano. He joins us via video chat to give, of course, his comments on the developments. Good afternoon, Dr. Hayatu. Welcome to the program. First of all, can you give us your direction that this protest has now taken, especially in Kano, where we see that the front of the government house has sort of turned, to the unexpected, if I may just say?
Good afternoon, my brothers in the studio and sister, and good afternoon, Nigerians. And I think that it's a new story now, that there's a serious problem in Kano because of the outbreak of those young people and attacking, indiscriminately attacking government facilities and private individuals. And I think that this is really very alarming because this it was actually much anticipated, and I think I wrote this in my Facebook page earlier when the protesters announced that they want to embark on protest. It's their constitutional right to do that, but I knew that this danger was coming because the protest that doesn't have leadership, a protest that is not well organized, and even the communication between the protesters and the government quota was very weak and didn't have direction. What you would expect is what we saw, happening today. I think in the morning I jumped out of my bed to really witness the kind of organizing that the protest was having. And whether the protest leaders and whether the slogans in the protest have some sort of coordination, that gives a direction of what the protesters want and what they're calling on the government to do. I haven't actually seen much of that. Although in the morning in Kano, it was, it started like a peaceful protest. People started coming out. Many of the protesters were even like spectators. They folded their arms, looking at other protesters, chanting some songs here and there. That was what it looked like in the morning. But as the day rises, phone calls were made across, by individuals on the streets, perhaps to their friends at home, that people are out on the streets so that they can come, because we saw that the population was adding up and more people were coming. Unfortunately, such protests were happening in other places, and we saw what was actually happening. It was a bit more organized in other places, like we saw in Abuja, for example. But in Kano, there were more of, as time moves on, there were more of hoodlums, that actually came out with the intention of destroying and looting public properties. And that was what we saw. Okay. We've seen, the government house, the National Communications Commission's branch in Kano being vandalized. You see young people, a small boy of 15 years carrying, AC on their head, or television, or under chairs and windows, vandalized from vandalized properties of different government establishments and even private individuals' properties. We've seen the destruction of, businesses like the Rufaidah yogurt, and areas around the Zaria Road, behind Abubakar Secretariat.
As a student and scholar of politics, Doctor, can you hear me? So yes. What would you ascribe as the cause of these developments, especially bearing in mind that this protest took well over 8 weeks, to plan and prepare for? But then again, on D-Day, we see the breakdown of law and order at this magnitude in Kano State. What would you say is responsible, for all of this, despite continuous call on citizens, not to go beyond their limits and, of course, beyond their rights?
3 major factors. One is that the angry youths who say that they are hungry and that they need to demonstrate to the government the magnitude of their hunger and anger, actually could have been engaged more properly and in a more organized way by the government, rather than making, mere calls and inviting some individuals who have spoken on social media that the protest must happen. It could have been, there could have been a deterrence, which will be in form of a proactive action by the government, because most of the issues raised by the protesters have made rounds in the social media, and the government is aware of these issues. The government could have, prevented even the happening of the protest, probably by taking some important decision and making announcements, and also assuring the protesters that all other issues raised will be brought to the table and discussed. The protesters can actually be deterred by that promise if they see an immediate action taken by government on those promises.
All right, Doctor.
And
Let's
pending
look at
ones.
Kano.
The second is.
Hello, Doctor. Can you hear me?
The second reason in Kano.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes,
go
I
ahead.
can hear you.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
The second reason, especially in Kano, is that the government of Nigeria could have known that there are states that you could call volatile in terms of this issue of protest. Very fragile states like Kano, Kaduna, Lagos, Rivers. These are very important states that normally when there is any form of, public, outbreak of anything, it used to be terrible in these states because of their population. So the government could have detected, and actually the DIG or AIG said in the studio that intelligence could be deployed to understand the dynamics in this state so that it will be determined even the number of physical security personnel that will be deployed and the other existential threats in consideration of these existential threats that will be deployed to the state. But looking at what happened, I have a friend who before the attack of the Nigerian Communications Commission saw the body language of the protesters and rushed to the police, to report to them that something terrible is about to happen here. But the police just looked akimbo and couldn't do anything. You could relate that with two reasons also. Perhaps because the police themselves are aggrieved of the situation, so they are probably, protesters in grief. They cannot be able to join the protesters in the street, but they are also hungry and probably angry with the government. So they refuse. And the other reason that could have prevented them from acting is that they know that the number of people on the street, they cannot contain them. They cannot be able to actually make arrests effectively. They cannot deter any form of threat. They could not do anything because they are handicapped. They do not have adequate equipment to be able to do that, for example. And the third reason that probably they are afraid, to apply force. And the next thing in the media will be that the police are actually people or shooting at them or something like that. So really all of this, you could relate it, to the lack of government's proactive, disposition in the way that this protest could have been contained in a better way.
All right, Doctor, before we let the AIG here in the studio comment, I'm glad you spoke about how volatile Kano can be, because I was going to ask you that question. Now, what could have been done differently? Because you said the government should have been proactive enough. We know how Kano is. We saw what happened during the election. We saw what happened during the whole back and forth. During the emirship tussle. We saw all of that play out. So in your experience as one who is vast in the politics there in Kano, what do you think could have been done differently to avert this?
Volatile states in themselves are a sort of early warning signal at every point in time. So the state could have actually deployed more intelligence, within the civil populace to be able to understand what might likely, happen in case, the protest goes out of hand. And it would have been that there is more, because if there is more deployment of security officials, civil defense, the police, joint security, force, between the army and the police and others, it could have been that these, physical security operatives are stationed in strategic positions that they could be able to really deter the protesters from attacking, public and private properties. Because other than that, you cannot stop the protesters from coming out to exercise their fundamental, human rights and freedom. So this is what the government could have done, actually, to tighten and beef up security in more strategic areas, so that the protesters could not have the opportunity to be able to, to come en masse, and undertake these activities that we have seen today.
Sorry. It just misbehaving now. Doctor, you do realize we have the former AIG here with us in the studio. So AIG, now, we know I spoke about Lagos and how volatile Lagos can be, and we also have Kano. So what's your take on what he said?
I honestly would want AIG to respond to some of these allegations, because I listened to him smile when Doctor mentioned.
I think these are issues I discussed extensively in the earlier program and the current program. I talked about deployment strategy, that when you have situations like you're going to have a peaceful protest, you will factor critical national infrastructure. So you're going to deploy the communication is an important critical national infrastructure. Very important. The government house, number one. Communication, worship centers. And I talked about those deployments. That one is
sacrosanct.
It's sacrosanct. You've got to do that, because otherwise, because they're going to, those are places they will go. You see, protest has faces. It starts peacefully, peaceful protest. The next thing is looting, as you witness. The next stage is burning. They carry TV on their head. When they have emptied the shop, the next thing they do, they set
there are situations where some have said they are waiting for the protest to happen. Some have said because they know on that day they would be leaving with a brand new motorcycle, brand new freezer,
so,
and the likes
so
of
these
that.
things are in phases. And I talked extensively about cooperation, collaboration, and coordination. And I say the civil defense, working with the police, there's no need all of them deploy among the crowd and to be seen. No. They will take their operations order, share with the police, and the police say, look, these are the list, because every command, I imagine, has a list of critical national infrastructure, and you prioritize them, and you see what number you deploy. And so if the police see that the communication center, because it's very important, you're going to deploy to that location. And when you deploy, it's okay, you've got, like I give an example, that perhaps civil defense is giving you 2,000 or 3,000 personnel. And once the civil defense is giving you this number of personnel, what are you going to say? It's okay, look, this is the number of personnel we have earmarked for this area. Okay, we are going to take 10 civil defense, 3 police to be here, because the police is going to be more involved in riot dispersal or crowd dispersal as witness. So you are not going to push them out so much. You put them so that they will be the ones that will police the peaceful march, and then to respond to the situation suddenly develop. Because those that are marching with them, you are not going to engage them in anything. They are going to be appealing. But you are going to have that critical mass that is there for deployment, for using the smoke, or when it becomes critical, when they're burning everywhere.
So now, on the scale, where do these responders now stand? Because I know we should have first responders, second responders, and then those that would come in to ensure that when it becomes violent, they come in to control the situation, and better still use minimum force, as you said,
exactly,
to control the situation.
So those ones, you look at your town in terms of movement. What will it take to have them move for government house? They're going to have that critical mass there. They're not going to wait for response. No, they are there in the government house to push back anybody that is going there. Do you understand?
Yes.
And you're going to also have another critical mass in certain locations. And like what he said, there is the element of early warning and response system. Of course, by now, the Kano should have developed early warning and response system, because there is a pending dispute.
Indeed,
there are parallel emirs. And so this is
tensions are
so that's early warning. And then when you are planning for this peaceful protest, you are going to factor that. And there's a lot to...
Before we get to all of that, now let's quickly hear from Nigerians. The phone lines are open. We would love to hear your thoughts. Tell us what is happening in your area. Is the protest still ongoing? Has it stopped you from moving? Has it gotten violent? We'd love to hear from you. So yes, the phone lines are open. Do well to call in drop messages via WhatsApp. The numbers are showing on your screen right away. So drop messages via WhatsApp, and then also do also call us and let us know what exactly is happening in your area. If you have questions as well, we have the edge with us.
Yes, indeed. I would be really glad to have Nigerians calling, and ask these questions.
It's important there. And another appeal I want to make to Nigerians: in your location, where you find suspicious individuals or individuals acting suspiciously, pick up your phone and call the helplines. Whether you're in Kano, in Gusau, in Sokoto, in Lagos, there are national helplines and there are command helplines. Call those helplines because there are officers that are deployed on patrol, and those are for response. So if you call this control room, they are able to respond. Don't wait until they call something, because your location is not the venue of the protest. And you find some 10 people with leave marching from one place to another. You've got to report it. You don't wait until they begin to attack people.
Before you do that. But then again, I want to go back to Dr. Aminu, who joins us via a video chat, of course. Doctor, if you can hear me, would you then blame what we are seeing currently going on in Kano in one way or the other, to the kind of political climate that has been nurtured in the state over time? I mean, like Lillian has alluded to, like the AIG has alluded to, there's been at every point in time one form of political dispute or another. If it's not the state governorship tussle, it would be the emirship tussle. So would you say the political climate has been responsible for this sort of breakdown of law and order that we've been seeing in Kano over time, to the extent that it's now becoming normal?
Yes, actually, you cannot you cannot detach these reasons from the political climate. Any political atmosphere you see in Kano, is arising from the nature and dynamics of the Kano society. And politics over time in Kano, although even historically, the division between, as a result of political party, between, the party of what they call the party of the masses and that of the elites has always been a bone of contention. And that has actually evolved to manifest in the political climate, that Kano has over any issue, no matter how slight it is, and then coupled with the population of the state. Most of the youths you see, on the streets. Look at what the protest that is happening. The children on the street. Many of them, if you check their background very well, they are actually not enlightened. They are just young people who have not been adequately educated. And so when these protests are happening, they are just always desperate to come out and, just engage in all sorts of violence without control. And if give the end of today, if you talk to some leaders in Kano, what they will begin to do is to begin to apportion blame based on political party affiliation, rather than facing the issues based on realistically the reasons why youths engage in violence whenever there is the slightest trigger. And explanations, when you go on in radio stations today, you will hear chieftains of political parties coming out to blame, point accusing fingers at each other, and everything is eventually politicized to the extent that there is no control. And even the government, look at the government in power, for example. Probably some of the youths, may have been, out of the grievances.
Hello? Uh-oh. All right, it seems we've been getting a couple of calls from Nigerians. We opened the phone line. So we're going to take a couple of calls while they're coming, while also waiting for Doctor to join us here. But while we're waiting on that, now, AIG, you can see this. I remember the NSAS protest. I remember people looting GP tanks on their head. People were carrying GP tanks, were carrying toilet seats, grinding machines, and
deep freezers. Different items that had no business with the reason for the protest. We also saw the same thing happen during the COVID-19 lockdown era, where persons went on the streets looting warehouses, of course, where they felt that palliatives, were stored. But it didn't save private business owners, of course, AIG, from the negative effect of that, because we saw people loot into warehouses of private individuals who were doing legitimate businesses and cutting away with items, from there. But then again, in all of this, what role does political awareness and education have to play in ensuring that things like this do not become the order of the day whenever, we have nationwide mass movements such as this?
I think the National Orientation Agency has his job well cut out.
But we all know that the National Orientation Agency is grossly underfunded.
The instrument of national power reside with the government, and information is one of them. That is why we talk about communication, not just military or police powers or something. Those instruments of national power reside with government, and it is the responsibility of government to use these instruments to create a peaceful, just, and fair society. And when the government is taking certain actions, really, they need to develop policies. And those advice can come from perhaps the Office of National Security Advisor. You look at, like, I believe he must have developed a lot of advisory to Mr. President on this that is happening. And what am I talking about? You take Kano. Doctor gave example of what is happening in Kano, what is happening in Port Harcourt, and all these things. These are issues, these are the advice I believe the NSA would provide to Mr. President and develop policies. Look at, if you do this, this may happen. And this is what I think you can do. But I think what we need to do now, what the government need to develop now, is to come about with a policy of managing the fallout of the fuel subsidy removal. And I think it's an urgent priority for government. Government has been talking about it, but might be based on looking at issues as they are, I think they are able to develop an informed policy that the government will begin to do, and you see the tension will begin to come down. Because government, I believe, cannot go back.
Indeed. And by extension,
but it's about coming with a policy.
Indeed.
And say, look, these are the effects, and this is what we think you government can do, and you make the job of law enforcement easier.
But AIG, then again, it's already too late to prevent this from escalating, because as it is, it has already escalated. What can be done in the interim and, of course, in the long run to prevent this sort of escalation? Because, of course, we know at this point, sending the security agencies in to douse tension is only going to add petrol to the flame. So perhaps what do we need to do in terms of political strategy to calm the nerves of these already irate youths who are on the streets, in one way or the other, trying to vent their grievances? Of course, for those that are out there to legitimately vent grievances, and not for the other ones who are breaking into government facilities.
I think for where there is total breakdown of law and order, I think there should be curfew, because that's the only way you can take a hold on the situation, so that you don't send the security forces out to use lethal power, lethal force. So that we are going to do. But going forward, the now government has to put together eggheads to brainstorm. There should be a way out. There are things we begin to see visible. Might be you're going to have buses, more buses on the street, broken down buses fixed, and then you could see them. We're not seeing new buses. Oh, government has reacted. That is something government can do. And it's not also going to be so easy to do it immediately. But government, through the leaders, begin to address some of these concerns. And I think there's a lot that is on all we are talking about in the studio. I'm sure government is even way ahead of us, because they have the instruments to get all the information, all the intelligence that they need to have. So these are issues government can do. But right now, when you are going to come up with anything, you've got to develop a policy. What is going to be the reaction of people? What are we going to do to cushion this reaction?
Okay, but sorry, you mentioned curfew. At this point in time, with the state it has gotten to, do you think curfew would make any difference?
Oh, when it's getting like Kano in those areas, you're not going to impose coffee on the entire city. You look at that area.
Hotspots.
Because if you don't do that, once a situation gets out of hand, if in the morning before this happened, you people located at the communication area and all that, and they're able to stop this thing, you can control it. Where they're coming in, there are large numbers. What are you going to do? Are you going to kill all of them?
All right, then we'll hold that thought. Now we have a caller. Hello, what's your name and where are you calling from?
Good afternoon.
Good morning. Can you speak up a little bit? Oh, good afternoon. Can you speak up a little bit so we get to hear you properly? What's your name and where are you calling from?
Oh.
Go ahead, we can hear you. Unfortunately, we can barely make out what you're saying. If you would give us a call back so as to get your thoughts, your concerns, and your comments on these developments, of course. Doctor, if you're here with us, I don't know if the technical crew can confirm if we still have Dr. Hayatu.
Yes, I'm here.
All right, so doctor, so we're talking about saving the situation from escalating more than it already has. What are those political steps or strategies that you feel can be put in place right now in the interim to ensure, that these irate protesters, as the case may be, go back home? Take, for example, would you say if the president should address the nation right now, it would douse some of the tensions?
But before, addressing the nation, like our respected brother said in the studio, the immediate thing that needs to be done is to put a curfew, even if not entirely on the state, but in those areas that these activities are happening. And most importantly, it's not only the curfew, because by the time, if you don't put the curfew, in good time, what it means is that by the time it is, getting close to evening hours, there is barely little thing that the security forces can do, because you are talking about when the night approaches, and a lot of more other destruction, violence could happen, in the states, and including more other areas, because you see children, taking televisions and ACs and fridge to their homes. What it means is that they are kings. Yes.
Go ahead,
Sorry.
Doctor. You can hear you.
Okay. What it means is that their mates at home would see that there is an opportunity out there also to go and get their own. So more, numbers of protesters or hoodlums will get on the street, and nobody knows what's going to happen. So I think curfew first, and then the state governor, himself has to take a drastic measure, part of which is to come out and address the state, to really express displeasure with the way things are going, and make some immediate promises, that they are going to link up with the president of the country. They have had these grievances, and that he assures that some actions will be taken. That's all for the immediate, stoppage of this violence. But for the long term, actually, there is this thing in Nigeria. Any government that does not discharge its responsibilities properly, it loses the moral higher ground, or the so-called moral foundation, to continue to ask people to make additional sacrifices. So when promises by government are empty, what it means is that disillusionment and mistrust between the people in government and the led is what will be the order of the day. And there is no amount of appeal that you will extend to the public that they will trust the government by its words. So it's important that the government takes advantage.
Doctor, we have a caller now.
Let's quickly hear from this Nigerian.
Good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon. Can you hear me? Welcome to the program. What's your name and where are you calling from?
This is Aliyu Deji from Bida, Niger State.
Aliyu from Bida, welcome to the program. Please go ahead with your contribution.
Thank you very much.
How's the protest shaping up there?
Yeah, the protest is calm here in Niger State.
We thank God.
Yeah, go ahead. So what are your contributions with regards to these developments and what the government should do? Because, of course, you know, in some states, it has gotten out of hand, if one would say.
Yes, I see you ask that question, and that's why I call in.
Go ahead.
So, since it has reached to this extent, the youth are angry. The major group that is affected in Nigeria is the youth. Majority of youth in Nigeria are unemployed, and their parents, their guardians are unable to cater for them. So youth resort into stealing, getting themselves into banditry and all other crimes. So the major group that is being hurt by the president is the youth. And there's nothing that can calm the nerve of youth, except if the president can bring a lasting, longer solution. And what I can suggest, because I don't buy into protest, because protest is going to lead into violence, and violence will take us into back to square zero, and we get nothing out of it. But when there is hungry, it will bring anger. So my advice is that the president should make a very difficult solution, which is what? Find a leverage environment for the youth to thrive.
But this would take time, Ali, wouldn't it?
My 3 points are...
This would take time, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it will not take time. You can address the nation now that youth that graduate should be employed automatically, even though they cannot be able to pay them up to the amount that is of minimum wage.
But Ali, isn't that a pipe dream, bearing in mind that it's not like the jobs are readily available for these youths to be absorbed?
There are a lot of gaps in the ministries.
Well, like you can see,
there's a lot
state road here in the commercial city of Kano.
Thank you so much. I really want to ask Doctor this question before we come to AID. So, Doctor, before today, on the eve of on the heels of all of these, we saw the president invite to the presidential villa governors, traditional rulers, religious leaders, student union, and other unions as well to the villa, prevailing upon them to call on all members of their unions and all sections of the society to, as much as possible, disregard coming out to protest. But then again, today we are seeing what we are seeing on our TV screens across the different parts of the country. Would you now say that Nigerian youth, in one way or the other, have refused to heed the directive of their leaders not to protest due to their situations being more dire than it is being reported? Or is this a different situation?
Yes. No, you know, that's what I was telling you earlier on before the caller actually came in. I was really telling you that, you know, the successful governments in Nigeria have a history of not being, of mistrust between them and the people they lead. And this is very important because at a critical time when you want to send a communication, you know, as a president of the country, you know, to your people, if they do disregard that information, you should begin to ask yourself what really is wrong. And that's not the issue. When all these leaders went to meet with the president, for example, the issue should not be that the president should send a message to the people that they should not please come out and protest, but that these are his words for them. These are his promises.
All right.
Because he has seen the issues, or they don't even need to come out for him to know what they are asking. They say it's bad governance, and they have listed a number of issues.
Take this call from another Nigerian, if you would allow me. Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the program. What's your name and where are you calling from?
Hello, good afternoon. Can you hear us?
Okay, we lost that caller. Apologies, Doctor, for interrupting. Please proceed with your thoughts.
Those leaders who have met with the president have been able to come home, you know, to the protesters to say that this is the promises that the president has made. Or at least the president himself come out and address the nation and tell these, you know, disillusions and, you know,
disgruntled elements.
Protesters to say that this is the steps that he is intending to take against the issues they have raised. A lot of that information would have actually naturally make these protesters to wait and see what is going to happen. But I told you, because of the historical mistrust between the government and the people rarely, believe what comes from the government in terms of promises and assurances that they get.
All right, doctor, you spoke about mistrust. You just mentioned mistrust. And earlier when we asked of immediate solutions that could be given, you said one of them should be that the government should come out and make a promise. Would that make any difference, being that people actually have little or no trust in the government and their promises?
Yes, the government can restore the trust between it and the people by by making promises and fulfilling them immediately. For example, most of the issues that have been raised, some of the issues are very critical. For example, this issue of, removal of subsidy. If the government promised that it's going to look into that and immediately, even if it is by the slightest percentage, remove, bring subsidy back into, for the people, that means that of life will ensue and people will begin to see changes in the way that the hardships are affecting them. And that would translate to them trusting that the government, is all out to fulfill its promises. And then step by step, the government could be rolling out, some of these promises they have made in terms of actions, so that the people would begin to believe what the government is saying. But if you saw what happened during the NSAS. The government made some commitments during the NSAS. Very few of those commitments actually, made the way to become a success. All the issues raised by the people were not actually looked into after the promise. So this is the constant mistrust between the government and the people, which actually prevents, providing solutions to some of the issues raised by these kind of ministers.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. AIG. Back to you in the studio. So one would easily forget that aside being a retired police officer who, travels the rank of Assistant Inspector General of Police, but most importantly, you're also a Nigerian, and this issue affects you as much, as it affects everyone else. What's your assessment on these developments, and what are the quick things that we can do to ensure that, this issue is as much as possible managed in terms of political, intervention?
I think there should be sincerity of purpose and transparency in dealing with some of these issues. Of course, there are some of them that look so impossible. I don't think fuel price is going to return to 100 naira unless you remove zeros. Maybe the highest currency in Nigeria becomes 100 naira. Then you go back to the 325 naira and all that. So but I think they just want to make their voice heard. I think the government needs to look at some of those issues raised. For example, in terms of public transportation, let them see that there are new buses plying the roads, and that even though the price of fuel has gone that high, you don't even need your car on weekends when you want to go out with your family. Otherwise, if they see more buses, they don't have to be in the rain. And I think that may assuage their anger. But the government can do that. And I think government perhaps is doing that already. But it's something I think government can do. Secondly, I think there should be more engagement, the civil society. Because I think this protest was organized largely by members of the civil society. I don't know if they were part of the group that the president met, but I think there is a need to have a kind of town hall meeting with the various organized civil society groups.
So messages that have been sent in via WhatsApp from viewers from across Nigeria. This one says there is no protest going on here in Sankra, Benue State, since the governor has imposed no protest should be carried on in the axis since June 3rd, 2024. We endorse. Joshua writes from Benue.
And we have Yusuf from Sileja saying, we lost 2 people. Actually, the protest is peaceful, no looting, no vandalism, but we just don't know why the police choose to shoot directly at the protestants.
Another development there says, hello. High possibility that something like this may happen, like during the protest, due to the issue at Kano right now, the issue of MS, which most of the people in Kano are only waiting for an opportunity to come out to demonstrate. So
I think that's the same thing we just spoke about, saying that Kano also has a lot of pending
residual anger
that's going on with them already. But let's talk about what's happening in Suleja. Now, we saw a report here saying that 2 people they've actually been taken to the hospital. And at this point, it looks like force is being used. But at what point does it get to where, the security agencies get to use force on the citizens? We asked you earlier about day 1 and day 2 of the protest. This is just day 1 of the protest, and we're registering that someone has been shot.
Developments.
I wouldn't know whether there was, when things like this happen.
There are 2 sides to the story.
You hear a lot of stories, 10 people killed, and when you go, the information will not be correct. But I think Niger State Police Command will comment on that. But there are processes, and it's in the Constitution, that when there is no other way, you can, when you are trying to put down a riot, and people are being killed left, right, center, and you want to kill it, and there is no other way you can do it. Even some of your officers are already on ground, and then you have no choice. But
shoot up, right?
All right. And the doctor, the police officer, Lillian, and I don't think.
The police does not shoot into the air. We don't.
Listeners would know that.
They don't shoot in the air.
Don't shoot in the air.
No, they don't shoot anywhere. But now there is the protocol for riot dispersal. And I give you from the baton section, you have the riot, the rifle section, and all that. Now, when it gets to the stage that you are going to use leather force, it will be made clear that, look, all persons, in the name of the head of state, all persons assembled here are commanded to disperse peacefully and go about the normal of business. And they're armed with weapons, they continue to shoot. Then you can only fire at their knee. That
knee level.
Yes, even when our training does not capture, police training does not capture shooting.
They are spelled out standard operating procedures.
Yeah, and even when we go to the range, it's at the knee
level. All right, let's take this message down from WhatsApp.
We'll fire at the knee.
All right, let's quickly take this last WhatsApp message now from Buhari Mohammed Inwa from Kaduna. He said, good afternoon. What happened in Kano is very unfortunate. They are just looters, not protesters. May Allah ease our suffering. Thank you very much there. Well, unfortunately,
those are situations. But then again, let's go to Doctor who joins us from Kano. Dr. Aminu, I mean, we've seen the whole developments, but then again, I think it's now time for us to go on a break. And when we return, we'll be getting to Doctor to explore more on these developments and get more perspectives as the events unfold, of course. Join us again.
Wannan ba aiki. Ya gani ya ga ba aiki ba. Ya ga ba aiki ba. Kuna ba aiki. Wannan ba aiki ba zai ba aiki ba. Wannan da ba na ba yi. Ya ga ba ma kaunarsa. Dole sai an canza wa. Wallahi in suka yi mana yayin juyin mulki. Ku hukuma kullum kuna cikin siya cikin I actually knew the answer.
This is the August 1st End Bad Governance protest live in Gwagwalada here. The Gwagwalada dimension of the protest is getting very violent, indeed very violent, because the youths around here are not even taking it easy for any reason. But again, the good aspect of it all is that we have all our security men on ground. We have the military personnel, we have the customs, we have the policemen, we have the civil defense, we have in fact, they are all on ground trying to see how they can contain the situation. It is getting very, very violent along Lokoja-Abuja Expressway here in Gwagwalada. So please, if you're coming along this route, you have to be very, very careful because the situation here is something else. Thank you. This is live in Gwagwalada. Burning tires everywhere. It is becoming violent. So for road users who are traveling, passing through the Abuja-Lokoja Expressway, you just have to be very careful.
If you are traveling along Abuja-Lokoja Expressway, please, you just have to take it easy. Like you can see, burning of tires, but then the security agents are taking it easy. They are trying to contain the situation. They are well prepared and they are well on ground. But for travelers, please, you are kindly advised to stay away from this axis because it is getting very, very violent here. The slogan in Gwagwalada is Bamayi. Bamayi in Hausa means we are not doing again, meaning that they don't want anything about the Tinubu regime. Bamayi. This is one of the protesters. Like you can see, he said, secure Arewa is bleeding. Tinubu save us from hunger. I think this is reasonable, very reasonable.
We don't need that. We don't need that. We don't need to do again. We don't need to do again. People, they suffer.
That is what. Please, travelers using the Abuja-Lokoja Expressway, you are advised to stay away completely. Please, you are advised to stay away completely. alligators, Nigerian masses.
It's happening in Lagos Square, head of service.
Intimidation. Nobody can intimidate us. We are from massive. I don't fear sending anybody here. If your strategy is against people, we are not going to listen to you. What is going to be people that affect the people?
Just imagine how long everybody does.
Why are you taking part in this protest? Okay. Now, come on, tell me. Now. To me dalilin da sa aka samu ba ka duba halin da talakawa suke ciki. Gaskiya. Yanzu ko abincin da talaka zai ci ya fita ne mu da hawara. Wanda awa suke ci. Gaskiya. Sai ke kafalawa ya ci. Da haka kuma sai da mai kai. To yanzu zuwa ina da
minimum wage is too much for average Nigeria. The 300 minimum wage is too much for average Nigeria. So to start with, some councillors that don't have even SSC, they are collecting 500,000. It's true. So let the salary of those councillors, because they don't have the minimum requirement, let the return to that 70,000 they want to give us. Let us see that in the cost of governance. The same goes for those in the House of Assembly. The same goes for those in the House of Rep and the National Assembly. Reduce their cost of governance. If they are saying the minimum wage of 300,000 is too much for them, let them also be receiving that minimum wage. At least they don't have to. Number one. Patronize leydi Nigeria good. Patronize what? Patronize what? Patronize what? How many lawmakers are using motor cars that have been made by Innova Motor Best? How many lawmakers?
Allah da a ce akwai direba, Allah ce mai hidima ko abu da mutu. Allah, don ba za a samu direbobin da suka iya mai.